Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak on these two bills tonight. And what I'll do briefly is just set out the 7 schedules before I descend into a bit of detail. So, in relation to Schedule 1, along with the Capital Works Build-to-Rent Misuse Tax Bill, implements tax incentives for build-to-rent developments and associated misuse tax as a compliance measure for incorrect claims against the BTR concession. Schedule 2 implements long-awaited regulatory reforms for the buy now, pay later sector. Schedule 3 implements a Medicare levy exemption for lump sum payments. Schedule 4 implements public country-by-country tax reporting for multinational companies with a commercial presence in Australia. Schedule 5 legislates the budget measure to list entities as deductible gift recipients. Schedule 6 amends the Federal Financial Relations Act to give effect to payments to the states associated with the October 23 National Skills Agreement and any successor agreements. Schedule 7 extends the instant asset write-off at an asset cap of $20,000 for the 24-25 financial year. Madam Deputy Speaker, just in relation to the build-to-rent scheme, now every Australian knows just how hard, and it doesn't matter where in the country you are living. Everywhere, everybody I speak to is talking about not just a cost of living crisis, but a housing crisis. When I was the chair of the Social Policy and Legal Affairs Committee, I did an inquiry, a very detailed inquiry into housing and homelessness, and we identified, the wall of problems that were heading our way. And I'm really sad to say that we are nowhere more advanced in relation to resolving those problems. In fact, it's worse. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that you know just how bad this is in regions and electorates like yours. But it's not just confined to country areas or remote areas, it's in our cities as well. I was speaking to a constituent yesterday, just last night, who sadly is going through a divorce, and she's a nurse, and she was saying that she's got 2 young kids, when she's going to have to sell the family home, and she can't. What she was saying, where am I going to live? I've got 2 little kids, 2 little girls. I'm going to end up with virtually nothing out of the marriage, and where am I going to live? And she's a nurse. So does that mean that one of our frontline workers has to move to Gympie or Kingaroy or somewhere else? Because the problem with the Sunshine Coast, as beautiful as it is, it's being loved to death. Everybody wants to move to the Sunshine Coast, and prices have gone through the roof. You can't buy a house on the Sunshine Coast now, even the most terrible house, under $700,000. It's really almost impossible to rent a home now under $500 a week. And we know organisations like ACOS, and I think it's pretty well accepted, tell us that if you are spending more than 30% of your income on either rent or mortgage payments, that you're in housing distress. And a report came out just recently, just this week, that talked about the Sunshine Coast in particular, that frontline essential workers like police, like nurses, on a single income, like the lady I was talking about, they are priced out of not only just buying a home, but they can't even rent a home on the Sunshine Coast now. If you're a single income earner, and you're an essential worker, you can't live on the Sunshine Coast. Now, I mean, that is just an absolute tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy because how are we going to get our police? How are we going to get our nurses? It's all well and good for us, and I'm fortunate in that I own my own home, and we're seeing significant increases in value in homes. But I really despair for the young people, like the young woman that I was speaking to last night. I despair for my adult kids who are just, I don't know how they're ever going to buy their own home if they haven't got one now. I've only got one out of four that's got their own home. And this is a wicked, wicked problem. And those members opposite talked the big talk about how they were going to make housing cheaper. Well, how can those members opposite talk about making housing cheaper when interest rates have gone up 12 times under their watch? 12 times. 12 times. 12 occasions interest rates have gone up. Now, do you know what the average mortgage is in Australia now, the value? $750,000. Can you believe that? $750,000. I didn't believe that when I first saw it. $750,000. But do you know also how much those same people with an average mortgage are paying in mortgage repayments above what they would have been paying when the coalition was in government? $25,000 after tax.
After tax income.
After tax. Now, let's say 25. Let's just for the sake of the maths, let's call it $24,000. That's $2,000 a month after tax that the average mum and dad have got to find to make their mortgage repayments over and above what they were paying when the coalition was in government. Now, well, no, it's not just a matter of getting a second job, it's a matter of maybe getting even a third job. Because, and then you've got to look at what this is doing to the fabric of families. I mean, when I'm out there door knocking people and homes in my electorate, people, and I'm sure the same goes for all members in this House, people are really badly hurting. They are hurting and they are angry that they've been sold a pup. They've been sold a pup. They were promised cheaper mortgages. The Prime Minister, during the election campaign, stood up and said, "Support me, vote for me, and I'll ensure you've got cheaper mortgages." That's what he said. Let's call it $24,000. Let's do a bit of a discount. $24,000 a year after tax. So where did that promise go? And then, of course, he promised Australians that they would be paying $275 a year less in energy repayments, energy bills. How did that one go? Down the tube. Down the tube. Down the tube. Definitely down the tube. Because we know that the average family is now paying somewhere around about $1,250 a year more in their electricity bill than what they were under the coalition government. But fear thee not, Mr Deputy Speaker, fear thee not, because the very generous Treasurer in the last budget has provided Australians a $300 energy rebate. So the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have the gall to stand up in the House of Representatives and say you're getting a $300 discount in energy, totally disregarding the more than $1,200 that people are now paying more It's kind of like, you know, punching someone in the face and then stopping and expecting them to thank you. This government talks the big talk about cheap renewable energy, but everyday Australians are not seeing it. So when this government talks about the importance of the build-to-rent scheme and providing homes to Australians, we only learnt just about a month ago, probably not even that this government has spent $30 million, $30 million on their Housing Australia Future Fund. Do you know how many houses they've built, Mr Deputy Speaker? I'll give you a clue. Starts with Z, ends with O. Zero. Donuts. $30 million for not one house to be built. Now, only a Labor federal government can deliver that. So when they come out and talk the big talk about this build-to-rent scheme, you will excuse an old chippy for being a little bit sceptical about this government's plan to resolve the housing crisis that we now find ourselves in. Because this government is all about providing mechanisms for institutional investors to own these build-to-rent schemes. The big super funds, foreign companies, they will own these build-to-rent schemes. They will be the ones that invest in these build-to-rent schemes. And at the same time, we know that there is a push within certain segments of the Labor Party that want to try and take away taxation benefits from mum and dad investors who have residential investment properties. So it's okay for a big super fund to own homes. It's okay for a big super fund to rent homes to Australians, but it's not okay for you. It's not okay for a mum and dad investor to own or have the sort of aspiration. I mean, where would the residential investment market, the residential home market in Australia, we saw this when Paul Keating tried to ban negative gearing, outlaw negative gearing. The floor fell out of the residential home market, residential investment market, because in residential investors, mums and dads just said, we're out of here. We'll go put the money in the stock market. We saw that, and we know that there are people on the government benches who would like to see negative gearing gone. Certainly, we know that the Greens do not believe in negative gearing. And we also know that after the next election, it is entirely possible that we could be in minority government, where a Labor government is in some form of coalition or some form of power-sharing arrangement with the Greens. And we know that the Greens have consistently said that they are absolutely ideologically opposed to negative gearing. So you can bet your bottom dollar, Mr Deputy Speaker, if this government is reliant upon the Greens for their ability to stay in power, God help this country, but you can rest assured that if that is the case, there will be very, very significant pressure brought to bear by the Greens on the Labor government to eliminate negative gearing. And then it will be a history repeating itself under what happened with Paul Keating. Residential investors will desert the market. And where will we be? Where will renters be? Where will they be? This is a real problem. It's not a fanciful problem, and this government needs to come out and support residential investors.
I thank the member for